Do you think that the father's role has changed since the 1950s?
Very more involved in the family, I guess. Yeah.
Just more involved and yeah, family.
I say that it's become less of a masculine figurehead and more of a guiding force, where instead of not only is a kid just like looking up to a father, he's also he's more able to go to the father for verbal advice and things like that, where he would normally go to the mother. And I think that's changed significantly since in the past couple decades.
I would say that they have become more involved with children.
Maybe a little, yeah, because we're seeing a lot of dads staying at home now and moms working still. But I think that it's still the majority of the time the same, that they're the main providers.
I think it has a little, but it's basically still the same, but I think it has changed.
Think back to media images of fathers in the 1950s. With that in mind, how do you think the 1950s father would act?
I feel like the 1950s father would act as more of a disciplinary role. He'd bring the food to the table. He tells his kids what to do and how to act, and as well as his wife.
And what do you think the 1950s father's role was in the upbringing of his children?
Well, like I said, more of a disciplinary kind of act, makes sure that the kids set straight, tell them what to do, especially with the boys. I feel like their role would be to make sure they have a son, like, keep him in a more masculine state of mind.
And would you describe the 1950s household as a matriarchy or patriarchy?
A patriarchy, for sure.
Do you think that the role of the father was any different in the 1960s than the 1950s?
Yes, I do. I feel like there's a more liberal stance of how father serves a role in the family. I feel like, the feminine mystique came out and women started to become less oppressed.
So keeping in mind that gender roles were beginning to change with the onset of the new era of feminism, do you think that popular culture viewed the father's role in the family as changing as well, or was it doing something else?
I think it definitely was. I think we see more like moms taking a role with disciplining, and we see that they show more women in the media as activists, unlike in the 50s where there's more like you see the typical housewife.
Mm-hmm. And like what kind of women in the media as activists?
Well, we see the married woman in the Sound of Music.
Oh, Maria. Yeah, that's the other mother. Mm-hmm. And then do you know of any non-nuclear families that were portrayed in the media during the 60s?
No.
No. Thank you.
What do you know about the role of fathers in the 1970s?
Well, I guess what I know, I sort of assume, just because it's post, or just about post the Vietnam War, and so I would assume that there's some fathers coming back with PTSD and things like that, and other fathers not coming back at all. So I guess I would say that the roles of fathers were kind of lost in the 70s, maybe because of so many men going to war. But that's all I would really know.
I interviewed my dad a while ago, like a couple of years ago, for a project I did, and he told me about his dad at that time. And basically, the summation of it was that he wasn't very active in their life. Like my grandmother did most of the work on the house. My grandmother ran a business. And even though my grandmother was a baller too and started her own coin laundry system in Vermont, which is cool, the first one. But she took care of the kids, and it was kind of the same with my mom's dad, because he was not active. I guess he was kind of like just really stern and like beat some sense into him kind of guy, you know.
Yeah.
But Woody did most of the work with the kids. So that's pretty much it. I don't really know much else.
Are you familiar with the song Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin? And if so, do you know what it's about?
Yes. When I first heard that song, I was actually with my friend, and she told me that it reminded her of her father because he wasn't around a lot and she didn't get to see him, but that song just like resonated with her.
I know the song. Whenever I hear that song, I always think of the episode of The Office where Dwight plays that song for Jim because Jim just had a baby and he is working instead of being at home with his baby, taking care of his baby. And I mean, that's obviously the song in like a funny context, but I definitely understand that it's about a father who spends too much time working and not enough time raising his son.
What do you guys know about fathers in the 1980s?
They wore a lot of neon, I think, and those parachute pants, I think.
I don't know.
What were fathers like in the 80s? Do you know?
Cool. I don't know.
How did media influence the role of father in 90s?
Well, growing back in the 90s, I remember the show Full House, and it was about a father raising 3 daughters, and in the family there were also 2 uncles. So the only role model that the children had was the father figure, and they always liked the mother figure.
Well, the only song I can recall from the 90s is Father of Mine by Everclear. I remember it was really, really popular at that time. And it's talking about the absence of father and family and how he left his children and only to the mother to raise them alone.
How would you describe a father's role from the early 2000s to today?
Sometimes they're single dads now, I think more than they were before, so they had to have more responsibility.
I think there's significantly more teenage fathers, which is a bit of a problem. Besides that, I think there's a greater chance for a household to have a shared income between the mother and father, and so fathers are more likely to be around their house quite a bit more, so they can have a greater influence on their child's life. And in addition, there's also a rise. I think that there's a rising percentage of stay-at-home dads, which is, it's the same. They have the same role as a stay-at-home mom. The mom is the primary wage earner, and he's the caretaker of the children in the house and everything like that.
Pretty much the same as 2000. So yes, more time with family and single parents.
They definitely bring home the bacon in most cases, I would say. But it's not that unusual today for the mother to be the sole provider as well.
True. I mean, like I said, they're still the main providers most of the time. They're not as involved as moms, it seems like, just like stereotypically, obviously. But
I think they've changed more. Like they need to be more protective because like with technology, there's like more issues. But I think they're basically still the same.
Do you guys know any songs about dads?
Yeah, the one where, what did you say?
My father said.
Yeah. Father across the room.
Do you guys know any songs about dads?
Yeah, the one where, what did it say?
My father said.
Yeah. Father hill across the
Do you guys know any songs about dads?
Yeah. Do you know that one by Alan Jackson?
Oh yeah, Drive.
Yeah.
How does it go?
When Daddy let me
Drive. Do you know any songs about fathers or dads?
Can you say daddy's home, home for me? And I know you've been waiting for this loving all day.